Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So, welcome everybody. Tonight is the webinar for dyslexia and avoiding the summer slump. And I just wanted to say welcome and thank you for being here. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to attend tonight, and we're really happy to have you here. I thought I would start by introducing myself. My name is Peter Groth, and I'm the founder and CEO of Dyslexia Connect online tutoring, which I started in 2010. I was trained in the Orton Gillingham method in 2004 and worked as a dyslexia tutor for many years. The Orton Gillingham method is a really well-known method for helping students with dyslexia and other reading and spelling difficulties learn how to read and spell better. And so I was trained in that method and worked as a dyslexia tutor for a number of years, including early on after I started Dyslexia Connect. And I have about 21 years of experience working with students who have dyslexia. A little bit of information about Dyslexia Connect. We provide online dyslexia tutoring to families and to school districts. And if you're interested in checking us out, you can visit us at dyslexiaconnect.com. And we do offer a free trial of our online dyslexia tutoring program to anyone who's interested. And we offer that with no obligations, so you're free to just sign up for that. And it includes an online tutoring session so that you can see if our service might be a good fit for you or not. So for our objectives today, we are going to talk about what the summer slump is, what that term means, how it affects students with dyslexia, how a summer learning routine can help avoid the summer slump, some strategies and materials to use with your student, and then we're going to have a question and answer session. And the presentation will probably go about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll have time after that to answer questions. And I'm very happy to be joined today by Katie, Natalie, and Patrice. They work with the Dyslexia Connect admin staff, and they are all former teachers, and they have experience doing dyslexia tutoring and a wealth of knowledge about teaching and dyslexia. And I'm very happy to have them here with me today, and they're going to be helping to answer your questions during the webinar. If you have a question, you can submit that at any time during my presentation or during the question and answer session. And to submit a question, please use the chat box in Zoom. And if you could use the Everyone tab so that it goes to everybody who's in the webinar, that would be great. We would appreciate it. That helps us keep everything organized and keep the questions organized. And as an additional benefit, when you use the Everyone tab, everybody's going to be able to see your question. And it's possible that they have the same question. And so that could be very helpful to them because they might see, oh, somebody actually asked my question, and they'd be able to see the answer as well, which is very helpful. If you don't mind including your role when you submit a question, that would be helpful to us also. For example, if you are a teacher, if you can mention that you're a teacher and you have this question, or if you're a parent who has a child with dyslexia, if you can mention that, that would be helpful. Having that additional information helps us to tailor responses as best as possible so that hopefully we give you the best answer possible and the most relevant information. There is going to be a recording of the webinar available, and we are going to be sending this out in a follow-up email. So since you registered for the webinar tonight, you are going to be receiving that email. And then you can watch the webinar again if you want to, or certain sections. If you want to watch certain sections again, you'll be free to do that as much as you would like to. One of the great things about using the Everyone tab for questions is that our attendees are also able to provide great info. One of the reasons I like doing these webinars is that we get lots of people together with a great amount of training, education, and experience, and we can help to answer each other's questions, which is really, really nice. Um, if you're looking for a professional development certificate for PD hours, if you're a teacher or a paraprofessional, we do offer one of those, and those will be available to anyone who attends the full live webinar tonight. And if you would like to request a professional development certificate, We would like to ask that you contact us from our website. That website is dyslexiaconnect.com. And once you're there, you can click on any of the buttons that say free trial, or you can also use the contact page to send us a message. Those free trial buttons will pull up the contact forms and you can send us a message from there. And once you do that, then we'll be able to communicate with you about the professional development certificate. Unfortunately, we are not able to provide a certificate in response to requests that we get in the chat during the webinar. So if you would like a certificate, please email us using any of the contact forms on our website, and we'll be happy to get that to you. So we can start with the presentation. First of all, what is the summer slump? Well, we use that term summer slump or summer slide to refer to a decline in academic skills over summer vacation due to lack of use and instruction. How does this affect students with dyslexia? Well, the summer slump can affect a variety of academic skills. For a student with dyslexia, we are particularly concerned about the possible decline in reading, spelling, and reading comprehension skills that can happen during the summer. Why are reading and spelling affected? Well, very often during the summer, students are not receiving reading and spelling instruction. And as a result, they're not getting that constant reinforcement of what they should be doing while they're reading, using good reading skills, reminders about using good reading skills. And as a result, the student may not be using those skills that they've learned to read with good accuracy and to have good comprehension. Also, something we notice is that bad reading habits may also reemerge during the summer when a student is not receiving instruction. To give you an example of this, with students who have dyslexia, often a coping mechanism they come up with before they receive the proper type of instruction to help them improve in reading, they will often guess at words. And this is something that we work really hard at to help them get rid of because it is a very bad habit and it affects reading accuracy a lot, which also affects reading comprehension. And we've noticed sometimes during the summer, if the student's not receiving instruction during the summer, they may fall back into that habit of guessing at words. And once they resume instruction, they will need to work again at trying to like stop using that habit and getting out of that bad habit. So that's an example of what we sometimes see during the summer. Another issue during the summer is that the student may avoid reading altogether. Reading is sometimes tiring and frustrating for a child who has dyslexia. And as a result, if they aren't in a situation where they are being required to read on a regular basis, they may avoid it completely. And so we sometimes see situations where a student during summer break may not read at all for 2 or 3 months, and that has a really big effect on literacy skills. There are some reasons why the effect may be rather dramatic with students who have dyslexia. So, one reason is that effective instruction for a student with dyslexia is really a building block process, and a summer break interrupts that process. Methods like the Orton-Gillingham method and other methods in the Orton-Gillingham family very much are a building block process that focus on the students mastering block after block of material. So they master those basics and then they move on to the next thing while still reviewing those basics and build on that. And if a student has a break of maybe 2 months or 3 months in the summer without reading or without instruction, that really interrupts that process. And often there's a lot of review required once they resume with instruction in the fall. And also, progress for a student with dyslexia requires a lot of repetition. Typically, those methods that are very effective, like Orton-Gillingham, use lots of repetition. And if a student has a break during the summer of 2 or 3 months, that's going to interfere with that. Something that can be really beneficial is a summer learning routine. And there are a lot of benefits to a summer learning routine. First of all, Summer is full of activities, and sometimes it can be really hard to schedule in reading and schedule in other academic things because there are always more things to do, right? You can go to the pool, you're going on vacations, your kids might be playing sports, and it can be really challenging as a result to fit those things in. And a learning routine can really help you to be consistent with reading during the summer. One of the great things about this is that kids with dyslexia often love routine. They love being able to predict what the day is going to be like, what they're going to do during the day. And this can really help them be more open to summer learning because instead of, for example, just trying to make them sit down every 3 weeks and read, whereas they might say, "Oh, why are we doing this now?" In the middle of summer. If they have a routine where it's done on a consistent basis, they might expect it and be much more open to it, and it'll be much easier to make that happen. Here's some suggestions for strategies and materials to use with your student. First of all, you can have your child read aloud to you. This is a simple and extremely beneficial thing to do for any kids with reading. And here are some tips to effectively use reading aloud practice. One tip is to do it as consistently as possible. That consistency makes a huge difference, and you're going to notice a much bigger difference if you do it, for example, 3 or 4 times a week, rather than trying to do, even if it's just 10 minutes, 15 minutes. That's going to make more of a difference than if you maybe try to do like an hour and a half once a week or 2 hours every 2 weeks. So that consistency makes a big difference. And as I mentioned, one of the benefits of that is that your student's going to be more used to it as well. And so they're probably not going to have as much of a problem with it if they're used to it. One of the great strategies to use while doing reading aloud practice is to have your student or child go back and correct when they make an error and remind them to apply their skills. One of the things that students with dyslexia struggle with is reading accuracy. And if you listen to them read out loud, you will often hear them add extra words, leave out certain words in a sentence. They may look at a word and just look at the first letter or two and guess at the rest of it, or just guess what the word is based on what it looks like to them rather than using actual decoding skills. And having them go back and correct themselves is one of the best ways that you can help them increase their reading accuracy. And so, what I would recommend actually is if they read a sentence and there's an error in there, they misread a word, they add the wrong ending onto a verb, for example, they like leave out a word. You can go back and have them read that again and mention, well, we missed a word there. Please read this again and have them read it with 100% accuracy before you go on to the next sentence. And that's going to help them develop really good habits. You can also help them with punctuation and inflection. Sometimes students who are struggling with reading also struggle with punctuation and inflection because they're focusing really hard on just decoding the words and reading the words. And so you might notice that they go straight through periods instead of stopping. They might not pause for commas and different things like that. And this is a great thing to help them with during the summer. And a good idea with punctuation actually is to maybe have them physically take a breath when they come to a period. This is really useful because if they're going straight through it, you can just try to remind them to stop and take a breath when they hit the period, and that will naturally put a break in there, and that will help them start to get the rhythm of what it's supposed to be like with punctuation. You can also ask your student to stop when they do not know the definition of a word and ask about it. Sometimes students with dyslexia struggle with vocabulary. And one of the reasons for this probably is because since they have difficulty with reading, they aren't necessarily reading as much material or as often as their peers. And as a result, they sometimes struggle with definitions of words and vocabulary. So if you encourage them to stop when they don't know what a word means and ask you, that will help them learn a lot more vocabulary as they go along, which is really helpful. You can also ask them to describe what they have just read to you. You can either do this at the end of reading, at the end of a chapter or a section of the book or whatever you're reading, or you can even do it during reading if they're really struggling with how to answer. A great strategy actually is to, if they're struggling with comprehension, is just to have them stop after every few sentences and give you a summary in their own words of what they just read. I've used this strategy a lot myself while doing tutoring, and it's really, really helpful because it helps the student get into a mindset that they actually are thinking about content as well instead of simply reading and decoding the words. So you can make a decision on how often you stop and ask them about this based on how their comprehension is. For example, if you try at the end of a chapter, asking them about the chapter and they have a hard time giving you any info about what they read, maybe you can try doing it after every paragraph. If they struggle with every paragraph, you can even just have them read a few sentences and every few sentences ask them to give you a summary of what they're reading. And this will really help them to start to develop those comprehension skills. And if possible, it's great to have your student read every day if it can be fit in. And even if it's just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, we know every day is difficult sometimes, but even if you can get it consistently, like 4 or 5 times a week, that will help a lot. It also makes reading an unexpected activity, and that will probably help the student enjoy it much more rather than feeling like it's a burden of something that they have to do every once in a while that's out of the ordinary. Having it in the regular schedule will help them get into it more and enjoy it more. One of the great things is that reading can come at any time. You don't have to be home to do it. We sometimes have this picture that reading happens when we're at home and sitting on the couch, that kind of thing. And actually you can read lots of different places, which makes it easier to fit it in during the week. One good suggestion is that you can try to keep small books with you to read with your child when there is an opportunity. For example, you might be able to read while you're traveling, if you're on a flight or you're on a bus, for example, or in the car, if you're sitting next to them, you can have them read aloud. You can read when you're waiting for a doctor's appointment, or if you are in line for an event and waiting for that, you can have them read during that time. And these are all times that can be really, really useful to help fit those reading times in with busy schedules. Here's some suggestions for motivating a child to read. A lot of libraries have summer reading challenges where kids can win prizes when they read a certain amount of books and do a certain amount of reading, and that can be really fun. And I think a lot of libraries do those challenges, and so you might have a library near you that's going to do that during the summer, and that's a nice way to help keep them motivated. You can also select books that cater to their interests. To find out what their interests are in books, you can visit your library or bookstore to see what catches their interest. Just let them pick out some books and see what they're interested in. Also, it's good to remember that any type of reading counts. Books, comics, graphic novels, magazines, all of those things count as reading. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a thick book to count as reading. It can be a lot of different things. You can also ask your child's teacher or the school office about free reading sources. An Epic is an example of this that some schools have subscriptions to that students can use. So you can always ask about that to see if there are reading resources available for the summer. Audiobooks are also great. Audiobooks can help students with dyslexia stay interested in books and also help them build vocabulary while they are working to increase their own reading and spelling skills. Many libraries have audiobooks available. They often have actual physical audiobooks that are on CD or drives that you can get and use, borrow and use. And a lot of libraries also have audiobook websites these days where you can check out audiobooks for free. And in addition to that, of course, there are a lot of other apps that you can use like Audible and some different ones that you might pay for books, but those are other options as well. Public libraries are a great resource, as I mentioned, for books and audiobooks. And school libraries might also be open during the summer. So if your child likes their school library, you can always check with the school and see if it might be open during the summer, even if it has more limited hours. And a great way to see what your student would be interested in with books is to let them wander and pick out books in a public library. And that's a great way to help keep them motivated to read and interested in reading. Reading aloud is also a great thing to do. This is another great way to help your student or your child stay excited about books during the summer break. And when reading is part of your regular routine in any form, your student may be more likely to seek books out. And something I meant to mention about having them read aloud to you, something fun to do actually is to trade off pages. So you can have them read a page and then you can read a page and then have them read a page again. This is a nice way to give them a break and to help them enjoy the process of reading aloud a little bit more since they get to just sit and listen a little bit when it's your page that you're reading. Another great way to help kids stay interested in books is to model reading. If your child sees you reading, they may be more excited to read as well. If your child has an IEP and services through the school, there may be options for extended learning. Some IEPs include extended learning options that go throughout the summer so that they may be able to receive services based on IEP goals in the summer. Another great way to help a student make progress in the summer is dyslexia tutoring. The right type of instruction can help your student avoid the summer slump and even improve their reading and spelling over the summer so that they actually go back to school reading and spelling better than they did when they started summer break. If you're considering tutoring, we would really recommend looking for somebody who's using the Orton-Gillingham method or one of the methods in the Orton-Gillingham family. These methods are highly effective and have been used for over 70 years. And one of the great things is that these are highly effective with students who have dyslexia, but also any students who just need to improve their reading. So it actually doesn't matter whether a student has dyslexia or not. These methods are going to really help them make progress in reading and spelling. And Dyslexia Connect provides online Orton Gillingham tutoring. If anyone is interested, as I mentioned, you can find more info about that at dyslexiaconnect.com. So I thought it'd be helpful to talk for a moment about what Orton Gillingham is. You might hear about Orton Gillingham, hear that name thrown around. Orton Gillingham is a proven and highly respected method for helping children and adults with dyslexia learn to read and spell. And Orton Gillingham and the methods in the Orton Gillingham family provide an explicit, structured approach to reading and spelling. And they really focus on the fundamentals so that the student is mastering fundamentals before moving on to the next thing. And that way, it really helps them build the building blocks they need for good reading and spelling. And it also helps students who have a lot of gaps in their knowledge be able to fill those gaps in so that they can make progress. Um, Orton-Gillingham method and the methods in the Orton-Gillingham family focus on a number of different things. One of those is phonemic awareness. Students learn not only basic letter sounds, but also more complex letter combinations, and they learn to identify them in isolation and in the context of words. To work on them in isolation, the teacher or tutor often uses phonics flashcards. That's one of the ways that they work on that. These methods also teach syllable rules, so students learn to identify and reproduce the major syllable types of English, such as the closed syllable, silent E syllable, open syllable, vowel combination, and others. They also learn decoding skills. Students learn to apply phonics and syllable rule knowledge while reading words. One of the really useful things that we use for this is nonsense words. Nonsense words are tremendously useful for helping students hone their decoding skills because, of course, they're not actual words. So there's no possibility that the student has just seen that word a bunch of times and memorized it and is just reading it from memory of how it's shaped or the first couple letters because it's an actual non-word. And so these really help the student to get used to using their skills and decoding words. These methods also teach encoding or spelling. Um, they get to apply their phonics and syllable rule knowledge in order to correctly spell words. And they also focus on reading fluency. Students read out loud and are monitored by their teacher or tutor while reading level appropriate materials. Reading accuracy is often a struggle for students with dyslexia, especially when they have developed bad reading habits. And students are able to start breaking these bad habits and develop good reading habits, focusing on applying their knowledge of phonics and syllable rules. So I thought we'd provide some additional information in case you're interested in more info about some of these topics, like the summer slump, for example. And Katie's going to be putting these links into the chat. Understood.org is a great website for information about dyslexia and ADHD and other learning differences. And they have a great podcast actually about the summer slump, giving details about that. Katie's going to put the link for that in the chat. She's also going to put a link in there for an article from Reading Rockets, a website called Reading Rockets that gives strategies for summer reading. And then I wanted to mention that on our website, dyslexiaconnect.com, we have a lot of information about dyslexia. And if you go to our website, you can click on the menu button that says Guide to Dyslexia, and that will put you into a little article hub that has a lot of articles about dyslexia, various aspects of it. And there's also a link in there to our dyslexia blog, which has all kinds of different blog posts about dyslexia that you might find helpful. We also have a Dyslexia Connect YouTube channel, and we have a lot of videos on there about all kinds of different topics related to dyslexia. Symptoms of dyslexia, how to identify dyslexia, how dyslexia is tested for, school accommodations for dyslexia, and you might find these videos helpful. And here is the address to it actually, and Katie's going to put that in the chat as well. But if you go to our channel, you'll find a whole list of videos that we offer on there, and you might find those useful. Well, thank you so much for attending today. We're so glad you could join us. We'll start the question and answer session in just a moment. And as I mentioned, if you're interested in more info about us, you can find that at dyslexiaconnect.com. We'd also love to have you follow us on social media. We are very active on Instagram and Facebook, and we put lots of infographics and memes up about dyslexia to help people learn about dyslexia. So we'd love to have you follow us on those. We also announce upcoming webinars on those. So if you're interested in hearing about our future webinars, following us on Facebook or Instagram is a great way to learn about those so that you can sign up. As I mentioned, we also have our YouTube channel, which is full of great videos about dyslexia, in case you're interested in checking that out. And we are going to have more webinars on the way. We're going to take a break for summer and then resume doing our webinars in September. And we are planning on doing a dyslexia simulation webinar in September. And so you can definitely look for more information coming out about that. We're probably going to start sending out or posting registration links for that probably sometime in early September or late August, sometime around that. So you can keep an eye out for that in case you would like to attend that. And then we'll be doing other webinars as the year goes on. All right. Well, we can go ahead and get to some questions and answers here. Do we have any specific questions, Katie, Natalie, or Patrice, that we maybe want to answer out loud here?
Peter, there was an interesting question as to whether you should have your child read books that are below their grade level or assigned reading level during the summer.
That's a great question. So we definitely recommend having your child or student read books at the level that is appropriate for them. And what I mean by that is that a level that they can read decently with decent amount of accuracy. And sometimes this is going to be at a level that is below grade level. For example, they might be in fifth grade, but they might be reading material that's at a second grade level, much better than at a fifth grade level. And using something that's level appropriate based on their reading skills at that time rather than a specific grade level is going to help them make more progress because that material is going to be less overwhelming to them. And they're also going to be much more likely to like reading those books because they're not going to be in a situation where they like don't know every fourth word, for example, or have a really hard time even getting the idea of what's going on because it's at such a higher reading level than they're currently at. So we always encourage having kids read books at the reading level that they're actually at rather than just a certain grade level. So that's a very, very good thing to do. I wanted to mention also there are things called decodable books that you can get. Sometimes libraries have these, sometimes not, but they are definitely available online from some different resources. And decodable books are great because they're very careful at what words that they use in stories. And we use a lot of decodable books when we're doing tutoring because we know exactly which phonetic sounds and syllable types those books are using. And so we can give the student a specific book based on their current reading level and their current knowledge rather than giving them something that's going to include a whole bunch of stuff they might have to guess at because they don't have the skills yet to read those words. So that's another good option as well. Yeah. Yeah, do you have anything to add to that, Patrice or Katie or Natalie?
Just that that would definitely help build their confidence also. They would be
Yeah.
feeling very successful that they were able to read those books and continue reading them throughout the summer.
Yeah, that's a great point. I forgot to mention that aspect. It can give a really, really big confidence boost because kids love to be able to read books by themselves and actually feel like they're able to do that and able to accomplish that. So picking books that are at their reading level is also a great way to do that.
And I was going to say that if they're reading books that are just a little below their level, then they can focus on comprehension, their expression, their reading stamina, and their rate, so they're not feeling too frustrated.
Yeah, yep, that's a really good point, Natalie. And those books are also going to make them less tired, and so they're going to tend to read for longer because they aren't going to feel so exhausted by seeing a bunch of words that are above their current reading level. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Do we have another question? Let's see. I'm just going to take a look at our chat here. Um, oh yeah, Sarah asked, can our tutor help find books that are at their level? Um, I'm struggling to find books that my child likes and can read. Yeah, that's a great question, Sarah. And yes, your tutor can definitely make suggestions about that. And that's something that we often do actually when parents request that, is we can make suggestions about books that are at a level that would be skill appropriate for the student at that time. So a tutor, dyslexia tutor, reading tutor is a great resource for that to ask them about that, about certain books they can read in the level. And if they can give you a good idea of what level it should be, that'll make it easier for you to find books yourself as well if you're just in a bookstore or a library. Let's see. Looks like Vicky had a question. I'm a grandparent tutoring my soon-to-be kindergartner, the OG, and learning without tears. We are working through the summer. Have you heard of Amplify and Savas, My View literacy programs? This is what they plan to have kindergartners do next year. Will this be a challenge to what I am teaching? I have heard of Amplify. I have not heard of Savas, but Um, Katie or Natalie, Patrice, have you heard of either of these? Are you familiar with either of them?
I've heard of them, but don't know much about them.
Okay.
I've heard about them as well, but I don't have any experience with them. I will do a quick Google search, Vicky, and follow up with you with an email and see if I can figure out some more information on if that's going to collide with what you're doing. It to a different curriculum shouldn't collide with what you're doing because your OG training should set your grandson up to have a lot of success in kindergarten and should help give him a boost to get him ready for that so it's not so challenging. I would recommend having that conversation with your grandson's teacher to share what you've been working on so that the teacher is aware of the strategies that you were using, especially if you find something that works really well or keywords that you were using. That teacher may be able to use some of those strategies in the classroom as well.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation, Katie. Yep. Yeah, definitely. Um, let's see. Yeah, we had some of our attendees mention graphic novels. Graphic novels are really popular with a lot of kids who have dyslexia actually because they often have less print on each page, and so it's a little bit less overwhelming for them to read. So those can be a really good option. And I know a lot of kids who really like graphic novels. And like I said, one of the great things is that um, reading can come from any source. It could be a graphic novel, it could be books, magazines. So if you find something that they're interested in, that they're going to be motivated to read, that can be really helpful because that can be part of the challenge right there is just getting something that they want to read. So graphic novels can definitely be good for students if they're interested in those. Let's see. Yeah, do we have any other questions? Let's see. Oh, Robin mentioned Playaway Books. Oh yeah, it's like an MP3 player. I think I've actually seen those, Robin, at my local library. Yeah. Yep. I think I've noticed those and they seem to have some like CD audiobooks, but I think I've also noticed these. They're like MP3 players that you can just take and use for audiobooks. So it's a great recommendation. Yeah, any other questions at all? You notice come in? Think we have a list of general questions actually that we often get during our webinars. We might go over a couple of those just in case that'd be helpful information to people in this webinar. So, um, Katie or
P
Patrice, do you have those up there? Oh, thanks,
Yep.
Patrice.
Oh, sorry, Peter. Yes, I was going to say we often get the question about how do you support a child who has a diagnosis of dyslexia along with ADHD or ADD. How do you support
Oh
them?
yeah. Yep. That's a great question. And actually, dyslexia and ADHD do commonly go together. So there are a lot of students who have both of those. And as far as addressing the dyslexia, as mentioned before, we would really recommend using instruction that is using the Orton-Gillingham method or one of the methods in the Orton-Gillingham family, like Slingerland or Wilson, for example. There's some others as well. Those methods are going to really effectively address those issues. Um, and also one thing that we've noticed is that sometimes dyslexia is labeled as ADHD because some of the behaviors that we see from a student who has dyslexia might mimic some behaviors you see from a student with ADHD. For example, so one of the avoidance techniques that students with dyslexia might use simply because they feel really uncomfortable and feel like they might fail what's being asked of them, you might notice that they are trying to distract whoever is teaching them, or possibly distract the class because they've been asked to read and they're really afraid of everybody knowing that they struggle with reading. And so some different things like that can maybe look like inattentiveness or other aspects that might normally be associated with ADHD. They can be directly related to dyslexia in some cases because the student might have developed a lot of coping mechanisms to try to avoid reading or reading out loud in class. Um, so that's something that we tend to see sometimes. So yeah, that's. Do you have anything to add to that, Patrice or Katie or Natalie, about ADHD and dyslexia together? Okay, sounds good. Yeah, it is something that we see quite a lot. A lot of students in our tutoring program actually have both ADHD and dyslexia. And one of the other thing I would mention, and I feel like this is really important, period, but it's always very important to make sure that instruction is really engaging because if instruction is engaging and fun for the student, they are going to be much more invested in it. And if they do have ADHD, they're going to have an easier time focusing if they feel like they really click with their instructor and they really enjoy the session. So that's something that's really, really important. Yeah, that's
Related to that, Peter, there also is
yeah.
a question as does the child need to have a diagnosis of dyslexia in order to receive tutoring?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and the answer to that is no. A student does not need a diagnosis of dyslexia to receive dyslexia tutoring and to receive the instruction that's going to help them make progress. And in fact, a lot of students in our program do not have a diagnosis of dyslexia. But their parents noticed that they had a lot of signs and symptoms of dyslexia, and for that reason, they sought out help for them. So it's not necessary to have a diagnosis of dyslexia to do dyslexia tutoring and help them start making progress in reading and spelling. And as I mentioned, the methods that are really successful teaching students with dyslexia, Orton Gillingham and the methods in the OG family, they're also tremendously successful with any students who are struggling with reading. So you don't need to worry if you are unsure whether your child has dyslexia or not. If you get them signed up for Orton Gillingham tutoring, it's going to help them whether or not they have dyslexia. And that's nice because it's not a matter of having to figure out, well, is it or is it not dyslexia before getting instruction for that. Yeah. Any other questions at all? Okay. Well, looks like we answered all the questions in the chat here. So, yeah, I just wanted to again thank you everybody for attending tonight. It was just really great to have you here with us, and we really appreciate you taking out time from your schedule to join us. We are going to be sending out the recording of the webinar that's going to come out with a follow-up email. And like I said, we'd love to have you visit us at our website if you're interested in doing that. And if you are interested in future webinars, we are going to be resuming our webinars in September, and we would love to have you join those. So thank you very much for attending today, and thanks, Patrice, Katie, and Natalie for helping out with questions today, and hope everybody has a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.